Frida Kahlo was born into a world overflowing with color, heat, music, and tradition, growing up in Mexico where painted walls, vibrant clothing, and ancient stories surrounded her daily life and quietly shaped her sense of identity from the very beginning. From her earliest childhood, Frida possessed a sharp, curious mind and a playful spirit, yet life never treated her gently, instead introducing hardship early and teaching her that joy and suffering could exist side by side without asking permission. She spent many quiet hours alone as a child, not because she lacked imagination or courage, but because illness often forced her to slow down, observe carefully, and build rich inner worlds while others ran freely outside. During those long stretches of stillness, Frida learned to listen deeply to her thoughts, feelings, and dreams, discovering that imagination could grow even when the body felt limited or fragile. Books, stories, humor, and conversation became her closest companions, helping her transform solitude into reflection rather than loneliness, and curiosity into strength rather than fear. Frida's personality shone brightly even during difficult moments, as she laughed loudly, joked boldly, and challenged expectations, surprising those who assumed pain must always produce silence or sadness. She learned early that spirit could be louder than suffering, and that identity could be shaped intentionally rather than accepted quietly. Everything changed dramatically when a devastating accident shattered her body, leaving her severely injured and suddenly trapped within physical limitations that would follow her for the rest of her life. Confined to her bed for long periods, Frida stared upward at ceilings and walls, where time moved slowly and silence pressed heavily, forcing her to confront herself more directly than most people ever must. A mirror placed above her bed allowed her to see her own reflection constantly, turning her face into the most familiar subject she could study, question, and slowly understand. Unable to travel, walk freely, or escape discomfort, Frida turned inward, discovering that painting could become a doorway through which emotions might move when the body could not. Art did not enter her life gently as a hobby or casual interest, but forcefully, urgently, becoming a necessary language through which she could speak, breathe, and survive. She painted herself not out of vanity, but because she knew her own story best, and because no one else could explain her pain, strength, or confusion with equal honesty. Each brushstroke carried emotion, memory, and intention, transforming physical suffering into visual storytelling filled with meaning rather than silence. Her self-portraits refused ideal beauty, choosing truth instead, showing scars, tension, and emotion without apology or disguise. Frida painted pain openly, yet wrapped it in powerful color, symbolism, and imaginative imagery that softened despair without erasing it. Animals, plants, thorns, roots, and symbolic objects appeared throughout her work, forming visual metaphors that turned emotion into stories rather than explanations. Her painted gaze often feels direct and unflinching, as if she were calmly meeting the viewer's eyes, asking them not to judge but to understand. Frida refused to shrink herself or soften her edges for comfort, believing that honesty mattered more than approval. Her identity remained bold, unapologetic, and deeply connected to Mexican culture, history, and tradition, which she wore proudly both in life and on canvas. Traditional clothing, jewelry, and hairstyles became part of her artistic voice, blending heritage with individuality in ways that felt expressive rather than decorative. Frida painted what it felt like to live inside her body, translating physical sensation, emotional struggle, and personal memory into vivid visual language. Her work did not attempt to escape reality, but instead confronted it directly, transforming hardship into expression rather than avoidance. Pain and beauty existed together in her paintings, never separated, always intertwined, reminding viewers that strength does not require pretending everything is easy. Subtle humor often slipped quietly into her art, balancing seriousness with warmth and reminding us that resilience can still smile. As her confidence grew, Frida became increasingly fearless in revealing her inner world without filters or excuses. She understood that hiding her truth would cost more than showing it openly. Painting became her way of standing tall even when her body could not. Each finished artwork felt like an act of survival, proof that creation could rise from limitation. Frida painted not to impress critics or follow trends, but to endure her own reality with courage. Her studio became a space defined not by comfort, but by determination, persistence, and quiet bravery. Every canvas carried emotional weight, yet also a sense of control reclaimed. Frida's art spoke softly, yet powerfully, inviting reflection rather than shouting for attention. Her paintings asked viewers to feel deeply rather than analyze quickly. She showed that vulnerability could be a form of strength rather than weakness. Through every image, Frida shaped suffering into meaning. Her story, however, was still unfolding. As Frida Kahlo grew older, her reputation slowly expanded beyond her small studio, yet she never painted for fame or approval, continuing instead to use art as a mirror reflecting her inner world rather than a window designed to impress strangers. Her life remained physically painful and emotionally complex, yet she refused to allow suffering to define her entirely, choosing instead to transform hardship into expression, meaning, and identity through relentless creativity. Frida's marriage to Diego Rivera brought passion, conflict, admiration, and heartbreak, forming a relationship as intense and layered as her paintings, where love and pain constantly collided without ever fully separating. Together, they shared ideas, arguments, laughter, and artistic ambition, while Frida steadily developed a voice entirely her own, distinct, recognizable, and impossible to confuse with anyone else's work. Rather than copying styles or following movements, Frida painted from experience, believing that personal truth mattered more than artistic trends or fashionable approval. Her paintings became deeply symbolic landscapes of the self, where emotion transformed into imagery that spoke across language, culture, and age. Physical pain never disappeared from Frida's life, yet she continued painting through surgeries, exhaustion, and long recoveries, proving that determination could outlast comfort. She painted while wearing braces, lying down, or resting between treatments, refusing to wait for perfect conditions before continuing her work. Each canvas became an act of resistance against limitation, reminding her that creativity remained possible even when freedom felt distant. Frida's colors grew bolder and more confident, combining vibrant warmth with sharp honesty in ways that made her work both inviting and challenging. Animals often appeared beside her, not as decoration, but as companions, symbolizing protection, loyalty, strength, and quiet understanding. Plants, roots, and natural imagery reflected her connection to life, growth, and survival, even when her own body felt fragile or broken. Frida's paintings invited viewers to slow down, observe carefully, and feel deeply rather than searching for quick explanations. Her art did not offer easy comfort, but it offered truth wrapped in color, humor, and resilience. Despite growing recognition, Frida remained grounded in her culture, proudly celebrating Mexican identity through clothing, language, and visual storytelling. She understood that honoring one's roots could be a source of power rather than limitation. Children often respond strongly to her work, sensing honesty, emotion, and imagination even before understanding the symbols fully. Frida believed that art should come from lived experience, not distant observation. She painted herself repeatedly because she knew that understanding the self was a lifelong journey rather than a finished answer. As her health declined, her creativity remained fierce, proving that imagination does not weaken simply because the body struggles. Frida continued painting until the end of her life, working with urgency, humor, and determination rather than surrender. When she died in 1954, the world had not yet fully understood the depth of her influence, courage, and originality. Over time, however, her paintings traveled far beyond her home, touching people who recognized themselves in her honesty. Today, Frida Kahlo stands as a symbol of resilience, self-expression, and fearless individuality across generations. Artists learn from her that authenticity matters more than perfection. Students learn that pain does not erase creativity, but can transform it. Children learn that being different can be powerful rather than isolating. Frida's life reminds us that strength does not always look loud or aggressive. but can appear quietly through persistence and self-belief. She showed that telling your own story honestly is an act of bravery. Her paintings encourage viewers to face emotion rather than avoid it. Frida taught the world that identity is something to build, not hide. She reminds us that imagination thrives even under pressure. Every time someone creates despite difficulty, Frida's spirit quietly continues. Her colors still speak, her gaze still holds attention. Her story still matters. Through art, Frida turned pain into purpose. She transformed limitation into language. She painted survival into beauty. Her life whispers that creativity belongs to everyone brave enough to express it. And if we listen closely, Frida Kahlo's legacy still reminds us that even a broken body can carry an unbreakable spirit.